Welcome to what will be the first video that I do for my English class. The hope is that you can take this video, you can slow it down, you can speed it up, you can move at your pace, you can pause it and take notes, you can pause it, come back later, things you can't do in the classroom. I gave you Parker Palmer's introduction, or at least a section of it, and I asked you to think about what Parker Palmer is suggesting the problem is with education, what the problem is with the traditional classroom, and also what is the cure? What is a good version of what the classroom could be? What is he hoping that we adopt as a new form of education? I want to tell you a little bit about my response to the text. I'm going to read a couple sections from it later, and I'm excited to read your responses and have our discussion tomorrow. The traditional class is what I want to talk about first, and I want to argue this, that space tells us something. And by space, I mean the physical space of the classroom, the way the desks are set up, the direction that they're facing, where the teacher stands, etc. And to prove that to you, I want to give you a couple examples. First, I want to think about a movie theater. The traditional movie theater, all of the seats are facing the movie screen, and they're doing that for a reason. You came to see a movie. You didn't necessarily come to talk to the people beside you. In fact, people are really frustrated when people talk to the people beside them in a movie theater, because that's not what you came for. You came to see a movie, and you're talking to the people beside you is distracting. So there's a reason why the seats in the movie theater aren't facing each other. They're facing the screen because that's what you want. Space is going to tell us something about what it is that we want, about where what we want is, and about how it is that we can find it. Think about another example. Think about an arena, and I'm thinking about a sports arena. So maybe you're watching a football game, maybe you're watching a basketball game. We don't have the traditional movie theater setting here. There is usually a circle. Now, of course, we want to get as much space as possible, as many people in as possible to the court or to the field. But it's set up for different reasons. It is set up to see the action in the middle. Of course, that's what we came for. And yet, it's a much more communal experience. You're coming as a fan with other people. And so it's usually set up in some form of a circle. They've got you as close as you possibly can to the court, to the point where athletes in a basketball game will often fly off into the stands. Why? Because they want to bring you into the game. Space is going to tell us something about what it is we want, about where what we want is, and about how we can get it. Think now about a coffee shop. We talked about arenas, we talked about theaters, we talked about arenas. Now I want to talk about a coffee shop. Coffee shops that I go to are often set up where you have a table in the middle and you have 2 or 4 seats facing each other. And there's a reason why it's not set up like an arena, why it's not set up like a movie theater. It's set up facing each other because you're meant to sit down with your coffee and talk. I went to Hong Kong this summer and I had an opportunity to go to a few restaurants in Hong Kong. And I was shocked by the difference between a restaurant in Hong Kong and a restaurant here in Canada. Because here in Canada, when I sit down for a meal, the table, sure, the seats are sitting facing each other, but at each seat is an individual place setting. Each person has a plate, a knife, and a fork, and a glass. In Hong Kong, while you may have some cutlery by your seat, there's a huge circular moving object in the middle of the table. And it's there and it's designed so that the food is put not in front of you, but in the middle of the table and meant to be shared. The difference between the restaurant in Hong Kong and the restaurant here in Canada is that while the table is designed for community, here in Canada we have a much more individualistic idea of food. My food is my food and I will not share with you. Whereas in Hong Kong, the space tells us that they view food differently, that they view a meal differently, that it's a much more shared experience. Well, what does our traditional classroom tell us? If space is going to tell us something about what it is we want and where to find it, what does our traditional classroom tell us? Well, this is how it's set up. We usually have a huge set of desks all facing this way, and a teacher who stands at the front and gives information to the students. Students face the teacher stands at the front and tells and speaks to the students. What this says is a few things, and it says a few things that I'm not really comfortable with, and I wonder if you are. I know Parker Palmer isn't. It says this. First, that the teacher is the source of knowledge. And while this is true, and maybe in my case more true, just joking. While this may be true in some senses, the teacher often does have knowledge. The teacher often has been around a little longer, has gleaned stuff. It's not true that the teacher knows everything, and it's not true that you know nothing. There's something problematic with this setup for me and for Palmer, and that it says you need to be silent, your voice needs to be not heard, and the teacher needs to explain to you. Second, it says that you're on your own. These desks are often not together. Sometimes they're in pairs, which is cool, but they're often not together. They're usually individual, and they're not facing each other. They're all facing the teacher. Parker Palmer has a real problem with this. He says that this develops this is individualistic, and it pushes us towards competition and not towards community. The question is, what does the circle tell us? And as I walk through the circle, I'm also going to draw from Parker Palmer's introduction in the hopes that you can see how I see the classroom relates to his work. The circle is a very different setup than the traditional classroom. In the circle, we face each other. First, because we recognize that the teacher is not the source of all knowledge. Your voice is going to matter in this classroom. For Parker Palmer, and for me, your voice matters. You speaking into the classroom matters because we believe that you know something and that you have something valuable to share with us. While I'm going to be leading our classroom, I'm not going to be the fountain of knowledge that this setup implies that I am. Parker Palmer suggests that the way we view the world is based on the survival of the fittest, or the way that we have viewed the world is on the survival of the fittest, that whoever is the strongest will survive. That's what this says to me, and that's what this says to Palmer. This suggests that we're stronger together. I can't help but think about a popular TV series that just ended called Lost. And probably in every single episode of Lost, some person voices the motto of the community, which is live together, die alone. You may be on an island. It may seem as though you will only survive if you're the fittest. But what they recognize, and I think it's a true recognition, is that they die alone, and together they survive, that they are stronger as a community. I'm going to read you a section from Parker Palmer. This comes from page 14, Roman numerals. I'm at the very top, literally the first sentence. Since Darwin and social Darwinism, the popular image of biological reality has been one of individual creatures in bloody competition over scarce resources. He's suggesting that this traditional classroom is bloody competition over scarce resources. Only a few of you will get into university. You need to compete against other people to find out the knowledge that is here. You need to put it back onto a test, and you need to survive, be the fittest out of this group of people. I'm skipping down now to the very bottom of page 14. He says, students would learn more true lessons about the nature of life on all levels if we were to shape our schools around images of reality that are less individualistic and competitive and more cooperative and communal. The circle tells us that community is going to be more important than competition. I want this to be true for our classroom, and I'm excited about having our discussion tomorrow to see if you agree that community is more important than competition. We've talked about this already, that truth is in the middle, not at the front. In the traditional classroom, truth is at the front of the classroom. In a circle, we say it's in the middle. And that's for two reasons. We say it's in the middle because we understand that each of us has a voice and that voice is important. But we say it's in the middle too because we understand that it's not always completely objective. This model suggests that the teacher has an inside understanding of what really is true, that they know all truth and they can give it to you in an easy spoken format. The circle is going to tell us that while there is truth, while there is an objective truth, it's not as easy to find as simply giving it to someone. It can't be copied down. It's not going to be objective in the way that we know it. We find truth together, and it's personal. That what I'm hoping we recognize in our class is that truth, while there is an objective truth, that truth is also subjective. That truth is also something we need to understand, and that together we can do that. The final thing Parker Palmer talks about in his introduction is the ethics of education. In this model, the teacher gives information, the student gives it back on some sort of a test, but by no means should it change you. It's simply a means to an end. I'm hoping that our class can be something different. I'm hoping that Parker Palmer can inspire us to believe that in following truth, in keeping each other accountable to what we find here in the midst of us, to what we find here in the middle of us, if we can keep each other accountable to that, it can change us. Our community can push each other to change based on what we believe to be true. I'm excited about that. I hope you are too. Come tomorrow ready to have a discussion about it.